was a cafe, double D or triple D or something like that.
Okay.
It's on there.
Yeah.
If you walk in there, there's an old menu hanging from that. And the bank was the corner, the northeast corner. The cafe was just south of that. And there was two buildings coming off of First Avenue.
I hope to replace them.
Forget what they were. But if you walk around, you see giant pillars. That's why, because they're
The old armory was behind you.
Yeah, they tore that down and did
So eventually you guys' river house are just gonna be in the middle?
I think so.
So we should.
Well, hopefully we're done.
Hopefully they get some progress going.
All right, it is 3 o'clock. We will call the regularly scheduled Hutchinson Utilities Commission meeting to order. Any conflicts of interest to declare?
None.
No conflicts declared. Approval of the consent agenda is next. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Matt and second by Anthony. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we will turn it over to Justin McGraw on the financial audit. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I know, actually I think all of you sat through my presentation before, so it's going to be a very similar format. We're going to follow the PowerPoint that's in front of you and what I have on the screen here. If you're looking for more detail on some of the items I'm talking about, your financial statements themselves are a great place to start. Otherwise, as I'm going through it, if you have any questions, just feel free to stop me and ask your questions at that time. Maybe I'll put that start. Am I doing it? They're turned on, I suppose. Huh?
Well, thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, that's it.
Move to approve.
Clock wasn't working either.
So how does Jared miss the meeting with
I know.
financial?
Well, good thing we got it
We got
on
Justin.
paper. We can go analog. So on page 1, we have, well, pages 1 and 2, we have a description of what our independent audit report is. It outlines the responsibility of both parties, us as auditors, you as the commission, and what the intent of our audit is, to really determine if your financial statements are free from material misstatement. The big takeaway is on the top of page 2. In our opinion, your financial statements are fairly presented, they're free from material misstatement, and can be relied upon for gauging performance of the commission as well as for future decision-making purposes. Page 3 of PowerPoint, we have your statement of net positions, the overall balance sheet of the commission. And we look at it at 2 points in time, 12/31/2023 and 12/31/2022. So we can see some of the changes that happened over the year in 2023. Starting at the top, your current assets, these would be items like your cash balances, accounts receivable, prepaid expenses, those types of items. You had a slight increase in your current assets in the current year, largely related to your cash balances. And if you look at your cash flow statement when you get a chance, you'll see where that cash is coming from. But you had some large receivable balances; those were collected in 23, converted to cash, and then you also had some cash provided by operations for both the electric and natural gas division that help support that increase in those current assets. Your capital assets, the third line down there, these would be your property, plant, equipment items. You had a decrease in your capital assets during the year. It's really not so much that you dispose of a bunch of capital assets, but the depreciation on those assets or the wear and tear over the year decreased the value in those assets. So it was really outpaced any additions you had in 2023. On the bottom half, looking at your liabilities, your current liabilities, these are your routine bills. So those monthly bills that come in, accounts payable, salaries, wages payable, those types of items, decreased in 2023 compared to 2022, largely due to the purchase power natural gas bills that were so much higher at the end of 2022 that they weren't there in 2023 at that same level. So you saw a decrease there. It's going to be a trend probably throughout this presentation on the expense side of things, that purchase power and natural gas costs. Your long-term liabilities, so these are two main types of liabilities. One is your outstanding debt balances, and then your net pension liability with payoff. You did have a decrease in your long-term liabilities. I mean, you made your scheduled debt payments. That was to be expected. But the big change was your net pension liability through the PDRA. It decreased about $1.6 million in 2023 compared to 2022, largely due to the actuaries who determine what that liability is, assuming that Para's investments are gonna produce more in the future, so your liability will be less. We'll see what it is next year. It changes so much from year to year.
It's a good year in the stock market.
Yeah, it's kind
Good
of
for us.
based on the performance of investments. So I always say, if you don't like your pension liability, just give it a year and it'll change. Then at the very bottom, your net position. So if you could, this is what's, if you could sell off all your assets of the commission and pay off all your debts, this is really what would be left over. And you had an increase in the overall net position, which kind of follows the trend that we've seen over the years. One big item that happened this year that is a little bit different than last year was your investment income. The gain on the investments that you had in 2023, you experienced a loss on the investments, really that unrealized loss in 2022 that bounced back this year. On page 4, you look at your cash and investment balances, and you look at 2023 and the prior 4 years, you can see the trends in those balances, and not only the overall cash balances, but the classifications of that cash. Either your designated cash or amounts that you designated for certain purposes did increase in 2023. A few different areas that you designated. Obviously, the rate stabilization designated cash amounts came back up after spending it down in 2022. You had an increase in your 60 days operating cash. And then pilot amounts. So the amounts paid to the city of Hutchinson, those designated cash amounts are increasing as that pilot payment seems to be increasing as well. On page 5, look at the activity of the commission. In 2023 and 2022, you can see some of those changes. So you did have a decrease, a pretty significant decrease in your operating revenues. And I'll look at those a little bit by division and a little later in the presentation. But you can see you had a decrease in those operating revenues, and you also had a decrease in your operating expenses. And I touched on a little bit earlier that purchase power and natural gas costs, especially gas for generation. You had significant reductions in those costs, which is really driving that overall decrease that you're seeing in those operating expenses. And the net non-operating revenues expenses, these would be items that are not related to providing power or natural gas to the community. Mainly your debt, interest payments, and those investment income revenue amounts. You see, you had that big unrealized loss in 2022. Those investments bounced back in 2023. Page 6 here. Now we look at each division individually, starting with the electric division. Electric division, it operated at a loss in 2023, similar to what it did in 2022, especially with when you factor in depreciation and non-cash cost of maintaining those assets or depreciating those assets, and then that pilot payment. But with the gains you saw in your investment income, you did have an overall increase in net position at that time. You can see on page 7 the trend of that change in net position. Excuse me. So yeah, 2022 was the big year where you had a loss on your investments. That bounced back a little bit here in 2023. And then on page 8, looking at the revenue by class. So who's using the power that's being purchased from the commission, and then what is that overall revenue per kilowatt hours. So you're pretty similar between 2023 and 2022. Looking at the Energy Information Administration, which kind of keeps statistics by region of what that amount is. Across all classes, they say Minnesota is about $12 cents per kilowatt hour across all those classes. So you can kind of see how you stack up against your peers in the state when it comes to providing power and the revenue generated from that power. On page 9, the natural gas division. Natural gas division had another good year. It produced an operating income in 2023, which was consistent with 2022. 2023 had a little bit of higher change in that position. So again, change in that position is the operations, so that would be the operating revenues, your operating expenses, and then again, those non-operating items like debt payment or debt interest payments and investment income. And this investment income did very well. In 2020, most people's investments did pretty well. If you're a saver in 2020 with the increase in interest rates, you benefited from that as well. And then on page 11, looking at the revenue per metric cubic foot. So again, you had a higher overall revenue per 1,000 metric cubic foot in the natural gas division. And it's up across, all your different classes compared to the prior year. Is that, even though you sold less natural gas, that decrease in your revenue is less than your decrease in the cost of producing that revenue. So those are the numbers I was going to cover today. In addition to the balances and the revenues, the expenses of the commission, we also look at a few different other items, like legal compliance with contracts and business state statutes. We came across no issues of non-compliance, so it usually tells us there's a couple different things. Is one, that your team here is aware of what those laws are, and two, they're making sure they're being followed. And then in addition to the audit, we also give you that thinner bound document, which is really just a letter from us as auditors to you at the commission level to let you know how the audit went. Any changes in your accounting standards, accounting practices, any difficulties being found, which we're happy to report none. We come in here, we do ask for a lot of information, we ask a lot of questions, not only of your team, but your banks, your vendors, your engineers, and everybody is very helpful in providing us the information we needed to complete our audits and get us to the point we're at today. So we do want to thank everybody involved for helping us out there. And then any recommendations we may have. And the one we have this year is the state's new earned safe and sick time law. We talked about it a little bit with your team when we were out doing the audit. It seems like they're aware of what that new law requires, but it did take effect January 1st of this year. It changes who qualifies for safe and sick time, how much they qualify for. It expands the circumstances of when they can use that safe and sick time, as well as notice and documentation requirements. And it sounds like there's been some changes since we were out here. I don't know if you guys are aware of that when we first discussed it. So that law seems to be evolving as the Department of Labor Industry works through how it's going to be implemented and regulated. So I guess my recommendation now is just stay tuned to what that final implementation guidance is, because I feel like we're not done seeing changes quite yet. So, but when we know, we'll let you guys know too, so make sure everybody's on the same page. And then the last page here is my contact information. So if you're looking at this in your free time and you have questions or want more detail, just feel free to reach out, call, email, or if you're ever in Litchfield, stop by our office. So with that, I'll open up to any questions anybody has right now.
Thank you, Justin. Questions from the commission? Anything to add, Jeremy?
No, these guys always do a good job, so we work well with them, they work well with us. They're responsive. They're very efficient. Sometimes you go in those audits and there's just a lot of time wasted. These guys know what they're doing, they're very efficient. So we have nothing but good things to say about those guys. Justin and his team do a fantastic job out here, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thanks, Justin.
Yes.
Following that presentation, I would entertain a motion to approve the financial audit.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Anthony and second by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4 on our agenda today is approval of the financial statements. And I guess that's yours today, John.
Yeah, not a whole lot to touch on today. Obviously, keep you updated on kind of where things are at through on a monthly basis and through February. Surprisingly, right now, electricity is up over last year a little bit compared to last year. Obviously, gas is down since we had a fairly warm winter. A couple things I'd point out is just when you look at the customer revenue on both sides, you look at our customer revenue through February of this year relative to last year, our revenue is down 115,000. That's mainly due to the rate stabilization fund. So if you would go back to look at our at the end of December 2023's balance in the rate stabilization fund on the electric side to where it is at the end of February, our rate stabilization fund is down $298,000. So when we pull money out of the rate stabilization fund, it's basically just a balance sheet item. It's going from cash in the rate stabilization fund up to cash in our normal operating cash. So therefore, we're not showing revenue for that time. So had we been on the same pace of charging our customers and not pulling out of the rate stabilization fund, our revenues would be higher than what they're seeing. But that just means we've collected money over time that we've been able to get our rate stabilization fund back up so that in times where we have higher purchase power costs, we can use that money then and not pass it on to our customers. So the full amount of revenue that we're down is just strictly, we're using rate stabilization fund money now. So with that balance now, if you look at the cash designation in the back, it's down to $204,000 in that fund. So that's, so we were at $503,000 at the December, now we're down to $204,000, which means anything moving forward, we're well below that $400,000 threshold now. Any month where our purchase power is above $54 a megawatt, we'll be pushing that on to the customers as far as the PCA. On the gas side, when you look at the revenue, we're down $360,000 year to date. That's basically two things. One of it is, again, we've pulled money out of the rate stabilization fund on that side as well. Our cash balance has changed from the end of December to the end of February by $153,000. So we've pulled $153,000 out of the rate stabilization fund, and that was mainly in January. So that's a portion of it, not quite 50% of that. And then the other portion is just consumption is low. So that's about $207,000 worth of revenue we haven't collected because we're just not selling as much from a consumption standpoint. So those two pieces make up kind of the revenue, why you're not seeing the revenue up. Otherwise, expenses are tracking fairly consistent. But just wanted to highlight for you guys that we have been pulling out money out of both sides as we move forward. So we still got money in the rate stabilization fund on the gas side that we can pull down if gas prices or that side is higher than our metric, which is $5.25 in MCF. But on the electric side, we're below our threshold now. So we're going to be going into April. We have one more month, March and April, of prices, spring prices, and then June will for sure be in the summer month rates with our wholesale suppliers. So I would anticipate we may get through April, March, maybe April, but I would anticipate May, June, July, August, depending on what we're hearing for forecasts as far as hot weather. We may see some power cost adjustments above that $54. So there's something to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on that rate stabilization fund, but that's kind of the main things. Otherwise, things are tracking fairly consistent.
So those things will even out over the course of the year.
They will, correct.
Okay. Any questions for Jeremy on the financial statements?
I'll make a motion to approve the financial statements as presented by Jeremy.
I'll second.
Okay, motion to approve the financial statements by Matt and seconded by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Next item on the agenda is the open forum. I don't see any guests here today, so we'll move into communication. City Administrator Matt Yannick is not here today, so the divisions, to you, Dan.
I've just been working with Jeremy and Lonnie and System Control, working through some of these MISO questions we had with our Unit 1 and the capacity and how we're going to handle that going into the new planning year, which starts June 1st. So Lonnie's been doing a lot of that, so just trying to figure out how, this is kind of uncharted territory for us for having a deficit of capacity instead of a surplus. And so I think we've got that figured out now, and good for the summer.
Good to know. Dave? Nothing from you. All right. Mike's not here. John?
Very little. We had our first MinOps audit 2 weeks ago, I think it was. They audited, they looked at some of our programs as well as Hartman Corn and Broughton. Luckily we passed with flying colors. They will be back in June, probably for at least a week to start going through some other programs, field and records. It'll be a busy one.
How often do they do that, John?
We are audited every year.
Every year.
And now that we've accumulated Heartland with us, now they come out more often. They're going to be here. They were here this month for 2 days, I think is all it was. They were supposed to schedule for 3 or 4, only lasted for 2. They'll be back in June. For what they have planned in June, it'll probably be, I'm guessing, a week, it looks like. I would imagine. And they may come back later on in the fall. It used to be just 1 week. Now it's stretching out into 2 or 3.
Okay.
That's
That's it? Well, I would like to make sure we get it in the record on behalf of the commission to thank you for your many years of service. I know you're retiring from the utility, and all of your contributions are greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Been a lot of progress and development, John, on the natural gas side under your watch, and your dedication and hard work is appreciated.
Thank you. It's changed a lot.
Yeah, well, you, I agree. You've done a lot of great things for the utility over your time here, so I hope you understand that we appreciate it greatly.
I agree with that too. John does a heck of a job for us.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You want to tell me how many years?
No, it's embarrassing.
It's supposed to be
I've
a
got it
piece of
written down.
pride.
31.
31 years?
31. That's great. It's
Yeah,
almost unheard of anymore.
Everybody gets busier once they retire, you know that, right?
Oh, I've already got a lot of stuff. I've got pipelines to build,
Yeah.
Literally or like figuratively?
literally.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, John.
You're welcome.
Human Resources, Angie.
Working on a couple of job postings that we have out there. We have interviewed for the welder service person position, so we're finalizing that and going through the applications for the account coordinator position.
Okay. Very good. Mark, anything on the legal side?
Nothing today.
All right. Back to you, Jeremy.
So just a couple items. First, the city had the VMF lighting bid opening the other day, so I followed up with Matt, and they actually came in more reasonable than what they had estimated or what we had put in our budget. So
That's a first.
yeah, it was kind of shocking. So the material cost was, the low bid was awarded to Musco for $185,000, and then the installation was for awarded to Starry Electric for $52,000. So the total project cost is $237,000 to redo the lighting down there, and I had $305 budgeted in our CIP plan, so significantly lower than what they originally estimated. So that's something I wanted to pass on to you guys. It's significantly cheaper than what they thought. So I would anticipate some of that starting here later this fall, depending on what their timelines are. But so that's going on. June 6th, to kind of put on your radar screen, MMUA is holding a regional meeting here. I think it's in the evening, I believe. They did 4 last year, 1 in Litchfield, 1 in New Ulm, 1 down south. Can't remember the other one, but they're doing 4 more regional meetings. They're trying to get around the state to give public officials, city council members, staff, other people interested in learning about what's going on in the utility world, what legislative issues are coming down the pike, and it's just a way for MMUA to connect with more people other than just the staff that they see within the utilities. So Rita had reached out to Angie and I and asked if we'd be willing to host a regional one in this area. So I believe she's got Art's Place booked.
Okay.
And you probably, because I believe you guys get the email notifications or email things from MMUA, you'll see on there there'll be a date selected. I think it's a time to be determined yet. I think it's going to be in the early evening, 4 to 6 or something like that, 5 to 7 or something like that. So just keep that in your mind if you get some availability. I'm sure we have people coming from other parts of the region, elected officials and other people that will show up. They usually get about 40 to 50 people will attend that, and then some of the MMUA staff will come out and some of their general counsel, and really try to, they're trying to do some outreach, so it'd be good to have some representation from our board there, and as well as some city council members if they want to attend. So I'll give you more information as we learn more of the details, but you can kind of watch for that in June coming up. MMUA's legislative rally was canceled this week. It was supposed to be Tuesday and Wednesday, but it was canceled because of the weather. So we had some virtual legislative updates today through MMUA as kind of a placeholder and trying to do the best we can. But we're still all responsible for meeting with our local legislators and just bringing up topics. So I did give you guys an update, kind of what are some of the big topics of the legislative session this year relative to the energy industry. So we're just kind of monitoring those things as well. And then last, I just want to reiterate and appreciate John for all his years of service and thank him for his years of service and the things that he's done for Hutchinson Utilities and how he's, the impact that he's had on the gas side. He's built up the majority of that system on the transmission side and the distribution side, and we wouldn't be in the position that we are today without some of his leadership and some of his experience and background to make those things happen So I greatly appreciate his time and his service here as well. And then thank you to Bob for sitting on the commission. I know this is your last meeting as well, and obviously staff can't do their jobs and can't move forward with running a utility and being, responsive to our customers if we don't have leadership on the board that allows us to do our jobs and provides us some guidance and some decision-making along the way. So I certainly know that it takes a lot to sit on these boards, and it takes a time commitment to be involved in this thing, so I appreciate your time on the board as well, and
Thank
wish
you.
you the best of luck as well as you move on to better endeavors. So thank you.
If I agree with that, thank you for your time and all of your
Yeah.
wisdom that you've shared.
It's gone fast.
It does go
I
fast.
really have. It's amazing. I don't know how many, 7 or 8 years, but it just flies by. It's been an honor and a pleasure, actually. So,
Good. Yes, thank you very much.
That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Looks like we had some just review of policies, no changes needed to approve. Number 8, unfinished business, we have nothing listed, which takes us into agenda number 9A, award contract for Hutchinson substation. Who is that? Is that Mike? No. Dan. Went one too far. Go ahead, Dan.
We had our bid opening 2 weeks ago now for the circuit breakers at the Hutchinson substation that we went out to bid for and advertised for bid for. We had 3 bidders and ranging between $760,000 and $960,000. And so the bids were reviewed, and we'd like to award the contract to Border States for the Siemens breakers. They actually submitted 2 bids, one for Siemens breakers and one for another brand, but we're looking to do the Siemens breakers contract. Everything looked good, they met all the requirements, and breakers are a lot more simple than transformers.
Still I have no problem with awarding it as proposed. Just a curiosity question, how did it come in? Dollar amount wise is what you anticipated, and what about lead time?
Higher on both.
About 20%.
20% on the 69 breakers and 10% on the 115 breakers.
And lead
Yeah.
time is longer than what you're hoping for?
Yeah, 2 years,
Crazy.
107 weeks, I think is what it's listed as.
There's no relief in sight in that world, is there?
Haven't seen any.
No.
Wow. Patience is a virtue.
I think we had really originally estimated a little over a year on lead time. So we started hearing some more of these stories, and then DGR said that looks like it's gonna be about 2 years now. So that's why we're trying to fast track this and get this to you guys early this year and get them on order as soon as we can, and wait.
Okay.
But they'll still fit the project timeline, they'll show up a little bit later in that timeline.
Okay.
And also you ordered them earlier.
And good history with border states, right? So there's.
Border States, yeah, we have a contract of maintenance, or what called a maintenance or a materials agreement with them
Materials.
for day-to-day inventory stuff. And then Siemens Brake, we use them, Hutchinson, Cloud Sub, Plant 2, other places too, so we have experience with Siemens.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions for Dan?
Nope.
We'll entertain a motion to approve the contract on substation breakers.
I'll make the motion to award contract for a Hutchinson substation, 115 kV and 69 kV circuit breakers as recommended.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Anthony and second by Matt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have purchase of cooling tower recirculating pumps for Plant 1. Guess this is yours, Jeremy.
That is me. I'm also Mike today. So this is just a CapEx 2024 project that we had kind of on the docket for this year at our downtown plant. We knew we had to replace, as part of going through the cooling tower, rephasing and refurbishing of the cooling tower. We also knew that as we went through those inspections that we knew that we were going to have to replace the circulating pumps here eventually. We're just starting to continually kind of patch these things together, and we're having a hard time finding parts and replacement things for these pumps. Again, they were essentially put in back when we put in Unit 3 and 4, so they're in that late 60s and held up pretty well. But we knew they needed, the day came when we needed to replace these. So we put in the CIP for 2024. We budgeted about $60,000 in there, and they came in a little bit cheaper than what we had estimated. at around $52,460. So we need to first order these things, get these things here, and then once we get these here, we'll have to strategically work around shutting down the cooling tower at a certain time, and then make sure that we refigure the piping and things in there. So there'll be a process to this project, but we gotta get the pumps here first, and then we'll work through the repiping phase, and then making sure we're pulling down the cooling tower at a time when we don't need to run our units. So he didn't anticipate it taking more than a couple of days potentially to have the pumps put in and repiped and things of that nature. So I'm guessing if we can get these things here in the early part of spring, we would try to replace the circulating pumps in the spring before the summer season really gets here. So
Is that plumbing and replacement work something we do internally, or is it contract?
I think it depends on the size of the piping and what we're going to need. We may be able to do some, but I think we may have to contract some of that piping work out for welding and things of that nature too. We haven't gotten the full conversation about the timing and the need, but I would anticipate it had to contract some work as well for just recirculating that.
So we got a life's long work out of those pumps that are in there.
Yeah, they've lasted a lot longer than I would have thought
55
they would.
years. Pretty good.
Any other questions for Jeremy?
Nope.
Entertain a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of the cooling tower recirculating pumps from Border States.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Bob and a second by Matt to approve requisition 9860. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, agenda item 9C is requisition 9861, Renegade Professional Services Agreement. It's Jeremy again.
So I can just kind of give you an overview, and John can certainly add some information if he's got something else to share. But John and I met with Jen from Renegade. She's one of the people that works for this consulting firm that does a lot of the regulatory compliance, things on the natural gas side of things. Obviously, John had mentioned, with Heartland Corn taking on that customer, there's also, we're doing all their O&Ms and their compliance things in the natural gas industry for the federal and state regulations on their behalf, since they're just on the business of the natural gas industry. So as part of those things, they had provided us a proposal to do a lot of the things that are required of our transmission facilities, because both our facilities and Heartland Corn's are in high consequent areas. We have to do high consequent and a moderate consequent assessments every year to make sure we're staying in compliance with PHMSA. We also have to do a class location assessment to make sure that we're in compliance with those and that our facilities are classified correctly under the laws and the code. And then also providing some services as far as continually keeping our manuals and some of our O&M programs up to date as regulations are changing on the federal side, and we anticipate, and we kind of went through a couple of those major changes that we think are coming down the pike here from the federal regulations this year, and so they'll help us ensure that our manuals are updated with the federal regulation guidelines that we need to have in those programs or in those policies, and kind of monitor those things as we go along. So we have to do a lot of this stuff on an annual basis, so the proposal in the pack would help us make sure we're in compliance for 2024 through this year. And then, if we need additional expertise or things that we need to, search out for, we can certainly reach out to those guys for other additional things as we move forward. So we did meet with Heartland Corn as well this week and let them know that, because you do have your own transmission line and you do have an area that's in a high consequent area, you're going to have to follow the same guidelines and parameters that we do as an owner of a transmission line as well. And so they're aware of the cost to be in compliance with those things, and we worked through that with the meeting we had the other day too, so they seem to be on board with that as well. So anything else to add, John?
No. I've known the people from REA, Renegade Energy Advisors, quite a few years. Jen and Brandy are both the CEOs there. They do quality work. They're both very, very intelligent young ladies. But just to remind you, these are not all of our manuals that will need to be updated this year. This is just basically the portion dealing with the transmission rules that are changing. There are other things that will have to be updated as well.
So this is an annual cost, or is that the anticipation going forward?
Potentially, yeah.
And is part of it offset with Heartland?
Yes, Heartland will be responsible for their portion in this agreement. So it's broken down by the two. You can see HUC's cost to stay in compliance when the transmission is around $78,000,
Okay.
and then Heartland Corns is around $35,000 as well on that. But they're going to be required to do the same types of things that we are because they own a transmission asset like we do now. And they're lower than Johnson. We had to clear them that you have to stay in compliance with these things, and we're going to make sure you're in compliance because we're going to be the operators of your facility, and so we're the ones that are going to house all the information and the manuals and the records and things like documentation when the audits happen. So, which they were fine with because they don't really want to have anything to do with audits or record keeping or any of that stuff related to the natural gas industry. So, and Jennifer, she was great. She came from WSB, from the consulting firm, and she specializes in the natural gas side of things, and so she's well versed. They stay up on the regulations and regulatory requirements, and can understand the minutia of those advisory committees and what's coming down the pike. So she gave us kind of some things to think about and kind of keep on our radar screen as things are constantly changing, in that sector. So.
I don't remember recalling, Jeremy, if there's a geohazard analysis in there for both pipelines. But since we both have HCAs, we are required to do geohazard analyses as well. And Jen is a geomorphologist, so her group does a fantastic job on those studies, and their prices are very reasonable.
So there's a geospatial analysis, is that what that is?
No.
That's different, yeah.
Okay.
And then we talked a little bit about that at the meeting, just some of the locations to watch and along our pipeline.
A lot of there's a lot of things coming up regulation-wise, but yeah, and they just did our geohazard analysis. I just got it back the other day, and there are some spots that we have to watch, and they provided us GIS, GPS points for all the spots that we need to keep our eyes on.
Okay.
We'll have to put a program in place to do that.
Other questions?
Sounds like a good partner for us.
They're very good to work with.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Entertain a motion to approve the Renegade Professional Services Agreement.
Move to approve requisition 009-861 to Renegade Professional Services.
I'll second. Second it.
Okay, motion by Anthony and second by Bob to approve requisition 9861. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Last item on the agenda is the LM 6000 update.
The moment you guys have all been waiting for. So I've individually had conversations with 3 of the 4 board members here. I know Kathy was out for the month and had limited email and contact information, so I don't know if she's seen either the packet or some of that information I sent out to you guys as well. So I don't, unless you want me to go into details, kind of where we're at, I'll keep it kind of a high level and just say, I've kind of given you guys 3 to 4 options to think about. Right now, we're still waiting on our mid-shaft about where that may be. Like I said, it's out right now for NDT testing and potential recoding. We may not hear back on that for another couple weeks, as far as where the NDT results come back on, and then if they can recode it, what probability do we have of a concern of that thing going back together and then putting back in our own unit? So that was option 1. Option 2 is if our mid-shaft isn't an option, going with the second, aftermarket option from Pro Energy and kind of giving an additional cost to buy the mid-shaft on that. They said they could have that ready in about 8 weeks and ship down to GE. So that's another option that we can entertain if we need to. We have both of those kind of running in parallel right now. Option 1 and option 2, we're both waiting for additional information back on both of those to see, are they still viable? Is one more viable than the other? And then option 3 has been a PA engine exchange that just came up over the last couple weeks. We talked about air permitting, because our air permit allows us to do a like exchange of engines without having to go back through a reissuing of a permit. That's a fairly simple move if we wanted to go down an engine exchange we would put that in and we'd have to provide additional documentation to the MPCA that essentially says this is the unit, the serial model, make, the same type of generation mix. It's the same PA model, and basically document that we installed it and it's serviced on this date. But all those things, because it's a similar unit to ours, all fall within the parameters of our permitting. So there wouldn't be this huge lag time of having to go through a new application process and have a review done, which was going to be the issue when we looked at the PC model several months ago. That was even more expensive than the PA model. So that is more of a viable option right now than the other ones that we've had on an engine exchange. So I did send you guys a proposal. You can kind of see what that looks like. They are offering a 2-year warranty on that piece. You can see the payment parameters. You know, if option 3 becomes the most viable one moving forward, you know, you can expect to, you know, pay out that amount of money in a couple months, because they were very aggressive on the payment. I tried getting them out to be a little bit more lengthy than what they originally had, and I got them to move it out to a 40-40-20 split versus a 40% down and a 60%. But they weren't going to veer a whole lot from that, so there'd be a fairly quick outlay of cash on that option. They would give us credit for the oil leak, since we've already got a PO, and they're going to fix our current engine anyway, but they would give us credit on the new unit for the engine and oil leak, and then they would absorb the NSRs that we've already agreed should be done on the engine. I'm anticipating them, if we did an engine exchange, they'd be fixing our unit or refurbishing it and then either selling it or selling parts off it to other people that have those PA models. But at least gives you another viable option if option 1 and 2 aren't real viable. Again, in option 1 and 2, you know, what has been told to us is there will be a duty to warn issued on those either options, because they're not OEM parts, or they don't meet the specs of OEM, so that's just their standard issuance of, if it's not done by us, we're not going to warranty it. You guys are certainly aware they're not going to warranty it anyway if we don't do all the NSRs, so, you know, they essentially say, well, put it back, or we can put it back, and then you guys are kind of on your line with how you want to operate that. So that's kind of where we're at with those things. I did hear yesterday, I did get an email yesterday from Dan, who's our rep. He said, you know, where are you guys at on a potential engine exchange relative to the other 2 options? I, of course, said, where are we at the other 2 options before we entertain the engine exchange? So he's still trying to get information and update on option 1 and 2, although he did tell me they have another interested party in the engine, the PA model. So certainly that's a risk if we stay the course on option 1 or 2. That PA engine may or may not be around when we come to a determination, so we just have to be comfortable with what option we need to go down. Where I haven't gotten to on option 1 or 2 is fully having conversations with our insurance carriers to see if there's an insurance gap on those. We have two insurance carriers. We have Hartford, which is our equipment coverage. It's an additional coverage of our League of Minnesota Cities coverage. So the league covers fire, it covers, you know, general liability coverage, injury, you know, things of that nature, workers' comp, but it doesn't particularly cover a lot of equipment failure. That's why we had to go out and get equipment failure coverage, because the league does not insure pieces of equipment in the energy industry. That's just too much of a risk for the league to take on. So we do have 2 insurance carriers. Of course, they coexist, so depending on issues and things, they kind of determine who has coverage over what. Those things, if there was a failure or something that happened, similar to things that we've had either on our substation or things in our downtown plant, each carrier pays their portion based on what the overall policies are. So I haven't reached out to either of those 2 to talk about option 1 and 2 and what may or may not be insured. Are they comfortable with the same insurance criteria? Does it change? Do they not insure us? I have less concern about the league, because theirs is more general liability, fire stuff than we have these facilities, and I don't see there's going to be a huge gap in coverage there, but I haven't specifically asked that question of our brokers and of them yet. The one that probably becomes more problematic is probably our equipment coverage. You know, how they feel about something that maybe has a duty to warn or may be put back in service that you know, may not have a warranty on it. So So those things I haven't determined or haven't worked through yet because I'm not sure where our option 1 or 2 are at yet. So I didn't want to put the cart before the horse, but those are things to keep in mind from the board's perspective. So I would need to do some more due diligence on that in the next week, probably. I'd wait till Jared gets back because he's been predominantly working with Tony, who's the VP of operations here for AJ Gallagher, our broker. But we have several people in AJ Gallagher that specialize in the different insurance policies. So we have people that specialize particularly with equipment coverage that we work with through Gallagher. So I would coordinate those. So I haven't looked into that, and I kind of noted that on the stuff I sent you. Those are kind of question marks yet out there, and really where those 2 pieces stand if we don't want to go into engine exchange.
So we do need to have that insurance question answered relatively quickly, correct? I mean, if we get a negative answer back from them, why put more money into either 1 or 2 if we can't put it back in place and insure it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it kind of feeds into the conversation that Jeremy and I had over a couple days ago. Is I'm comfortable with 1 and 2 as long as we don't end up with a gap created because of the duty to warn and then having something uninsured. I'm comfortable with 1 and 2 if we are properly insured and if we have an internal level, staff's level of confidence that this unit is something we can rally behind and run for 5 to 10 years, something like that. If we can't get insurance or assurance of insurance that we'll get insurance or that is insurable, my support for 1 and 2 starts to fade because it probably starts to tell us something. And then I start to think more and more, should that happen, I start to think more and more about option number 3 being viable or a good one. So I think probably in that order, 1 and 2 running, as you're doing it, running it in tandem with each other, but you got to keep option 3 warm until, or kind of start moving on that perhaps in case we have to pull the trigger on it, is how I've been thinking about it. Option 3 now, as presented, is way better than the PC model that we were quoted a few months ago, in my opinion. During in your collective conversations with the commission, what was was there a consensus, and what was it? How'd the conversations go?
Yeah, I think it's generally, that was kind of my general consensus was if we think 1 or 2 is a viable, let's try to explore that, but I'm getting a little bit more warmer sense that option 3 is more viable now than anything in the past. And obviously there's inherent risk, right? And those are things I can't quantify for you guys. If this thing comes back and there's a duty to warn, even in the standpoint where we don't have a gap of insurance, I can't quantify the nervousness potentially of running a unit. Everyone knows here that we're in the business of inherent risk, whether it's on the natural gas side or the electric side or generation. So there's always that inherent risk. But the comfort level is going to be different for everyone, and that would be something that would be out there. I mean, I would even getting a refurbished one that they say is warranted, and have specifically said, well, can you guarantee there won't be any failures or anything that doesn't come up? No, we can't, because that's the business that we're in. So there's always going to be some level, but each person is a little bit different on their feeling and appetite for risk. The other piece it's been problematic for me is really to trust what I'm hearing from GE when they say the probability of failures are this. When we've asked them, what's been your history of failures on things like this that have been refurbished and put back in service? And they say, we don't really have any. No failures. So when the basis then, the question is asked, well then how do you predict, what is your probability predictions? What are you basing that on? It's all theoretical, based on the design of the engine, the parts that are going in, and the stress points. So I did send you that additional mid-shaft picture that had Brian, our consultant's piece in the back, and basically his last sentence kind of sums it up. It's a high stress piece of equipment, the mid-shaft, which has very specific tolerances on the spec because of the stress that thing gets put under when it's attached to those turbines. And if you're going to have a failure, which they classify major failure, it will be something that happens with the mid shaft that will create the major failure.
Can they tell you what would happen if there was a failure while this was running? Like, what would happen?
So a lot of it's theoretical, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, the turbine is spinning at high revolutions, right? So they've said the LPT, the low pressure turbine, could come apart. Stuff could go through walls. You know, Brian has sent us, our consultant sent us pictures of a turbine that's come apart, not because of a mid-shaft failure, but just came apart, and even walls that have protection in them, you know, barriers and things, stuff flies through them. So there's those risks because you're running a turbine, right? A jet engine. I mean, you're running this thing at speeds that, you know, his comment is if we have a catastrophic failure on this turbine, people are gonna know it because stuff's gonna fly apart. Like, and it's not gonna stay in the room. It's gonna go out based on some of his experience in some places where he's had to go and see failures like that. So it's the design of the engine that creates some risk, right? Because of the type of engine you're running there. And so I understand the point from GE where the tolerances have to be particularly narrow on particular pieces of equipment that are high stress and critical. So that's why I don't think you're going to get a veer from them, even when we try to say, hey, this doesn't look that bad, can these things be recoded? They'll tell you, yeah, it can be recoded, but we're going to tell you there's a risk of anything that isn't pristine, that meets their spec, they're going to essentially back away from and say, you know, we're warning you. It may nothing happen. You know, I asked, well, when you say a probability of 9, does that mean it's going to happen for sure? No, we can't tell you it's going to happen for sure. But we're just giving you our risk assessment based on our engineering design work and our theoretical inputs that we put into their modeling. So it's that kind of that squishy area that is hard to judge, and which is going to be hard for you guys to judge that too, because there's no really definitive track record they can say, yep, if you don't do this, 8 out of 10 times this is going to happen, or if you do this, it'll never happen. They don't have historical track record in my mind to substantiate some of the ratings they're giving, but I'm not in the best position to rate their pieces of equipment that they've designed. So you have to take some general word that they're trying to be honest and provide you their best estimate from a cautious standpoint. But we also have Brian, our consultant that we've hired, that has been in the industry and has worked with these things. And so he's poked and prodded a lot of questions related to that too. And we don't always get what I would say are real comfortable answers from direct questions that are really a yes or no question. They kind of massage around some of the questions. So that doesn't always leave a great feeling when we're sitting in these meetings and have these conversations that they're always being truthful 100% or forthright.
The difficult thing I have with the process is it seems to be slow moving and so delayed to the point where they knew when we had a timeline we wanted this thing back, and then now we have the opportunity to buy a replacement engine, right? It's just very convenient that it worked out this way. And I even in a worse position than you are to say, okay, is this thing going to pass spec, and are we comfortable with that at this point? I think that's why we have to rely on a lot of outside help with the engineering firm and get their assessment on what we will have, what's the safety aspect of that, and what are the expectations going forward. But it's difficult for me, I agree with you, to just really believe everything that that they're telling us as far as repair, replacement, and all these things at the moment.
Yeah, I think if I looked across the table over here, none of us have gone through this, right? Safe to say. Probably nothing even close to it. Maybe even nobody sitting in the room has gone through something like this. So almost internally, there's nobody that can speak with a high level of confidence or experience in how we should be going about it. But as I look at the partners that we have, the engineering firm, and I know you've spoken highly of Brian, and then I almost extend that thought process out to the insurance company. If they're not able to insure it, they probably have a fair amount of expertise in that line of business too. So I look at outsiders, potentially being Brian and the insurance company, or either the broker or Hartford, having an oversized voice in this conversation, while I'll end up voting on it, and I'm okay with that. You need the collective wisdom, maybe of those two partners. And I know you're working on that. I wouldn't understate the importance of Hartford's voice and Brian's voice. I guess this is my advice.
Other thoughts?
Does this move up our time frame to talk about the future of that unit? If I'm not super comfortable with option 1 or 2. Every month we come back here and it's the mid shaft is good, and then now it's not. Now we're gonna dip this thing into something and it's gonna be great, but it might not go to better, that great. And it's just, in business there's times that equipment fails and there's never a perfect solution to it. We just gotta make the best choice. I lean towards option 3, but would like to have further conversations about the future of that plant and or new technology, which would help me make my decision. But I just think when you start talking about employee safety, if I'm not willing to go stand next to that thing when it's running, I'm gonna ask everybody else to do that. I don't. My comfort level isn't super great. When you say it like that, and GE has been, this whole process has been terrible. You guys are the ones asking the questions when they should be the ones helping with solutions. It just seems odd to me. But
I'm with you on that.
this is not a reflection
odd.
on the utilities, it's a reflection on GE. So yeah, I maybe the conversation on that plant needs to happen sooner than later. Not just for that, but for regulation and everything else that's coming in the future, but I think we should at least hear what they have to say about the insurance and what GE is going to come back and say this one last time. But if I had to bet, we're going to be sitting here next month with maybe this, maybe that type of an answer. When we really need to get back to doing what we do best, is generating power. So my thoughts.
I kind of agree with Matt, because I think, we started this process, back in December, November?
Yeah, it left in September.
Yeah, and now we're in March and we still don't have any answers. It's kind of like, how long are we going to be hanging out there, So maybe option 3 is a good option to look at.
I mean, option 2 that's a couple $1 million.
Yeah, so right now our option 1, we're sitting about 1.7 in total between the NSRs and oil leak. For easy numbers, I would say by the time the NSRs, because they've got some additional NSRs they've brought forward to us, and we said, hey, we're going to hold off on any more NSRs until we know if the mid shaft works or not. But for simple numbers, that's going to be a $2 million project,
Right.
With our own mid shaft. Option 2 adds in there probably $640. Well, it does add a $645,000 because that's the price that they would sell us the mid shaft. So you're over $2.5 million, 2.6 probably in that ballpark. Where engine 3, the exchange, is a total of $4.3 million out of our pocket, $3.5 million on top of the oil leak repairs that we already have. So from going from option 2 to 3, it's a little less than an additional $2 million for an engine exchange. Similar unit, I think it's a couple years newer, 1 or 2 years newer. It's got more hours on it. Strictly more hours. They have 44,000 hours on the engine. Ours has 37, but it's been overhauled. They had a major overhaul done on it, and it's only got 17,000 hours on it.
So when you think about that engine in your guys' world, maybe this is a Mike question and he's not here, but is that a 45,000 hour engine or is that an 18,000 hour engine?
Well, I think it depends on how we want to run it. That becomes a business model of the utility.
What's the cost of an overhaul? Do you have any idea?
They said that the overhaul, when we were looking to overhaul ours, when it first came out, was about $5 million to overhaul it. The piece why that wasn't a viable option at the time was we're never going to get to the overhaul number, which is 50,000 hours, I think was the next interval. And we're at 37, and if we're running at 500 hours a year, we're never gonna get to an overhaul situation where it paid for us to do an overhaul.
Ironically, they were at, on this unit, they were at 25,000 hours in overall. Never was a $50,000 engine, 50,000 hour engine anyways.
I mean, I don't love the idea of having to buy a replacement engine that we had kind of a sunset plan for anyway. But I don't, to me, I'm hung up on the insurance thing. I think that if we can't insure an energy producer, well, you can't have it.
Tell us something.
And we need that. Otherwise, we are exposed very heavily for the next 4 years on what the market wants to do to us.
In the future, that it would have some value, would it not? If you go with option 3, 5 or 10 years down the road, you choose to go in a different direction, that would have, I would think, some decent value in it, wouldn't it?
So it does have value. So when I specifically asked the question, I actually wanted to write that in a proposal, but they wouldn't go there. I said, if we're willing to entertain an engine exchange, would you be willing to buy back the engine? Under the assumption we may only want it for 5 more years or 4 more years, which has been this consistent conversation with them all along, is we want to at least get to May of 2029 because we have contractual obligations. So if we would spend the money up front to do the engine exchange and get this in service in April, would you buy it back from us for $1 million? Knowing that it has been completely overhauled by you guys, we've used it very sparingly, and they wouldn't go there. They said, we may down the road, but we're trying to get out of the PA models as well. But they said there potentially would be a market from someone else buying it. What that market will be 5 years from now is anyone's guess.
Low hours on it.
Right. I was hoping they would say, yeah, we'll buy it back, but they're getting out of the lease program on the PAs. I'm sure they could help us find someone, I'm sure. Or we could have access if we wanted to get out of that. The other option is if we stayed into an engine exchange model and we feel comfortable with the 2-year warranty, that the overhaul is only 17,000 hours, that we're running it sparingly for energy sales, you can extend probably the life of that. But that means there's a conscious decision by the board to stay in that type of unit for another 4 or 5 years if you wanted to recover the additional costs that you're going to pay for the engine exchange.
Which we could definitely work into.
Or 2 years or 3 years or whatever.
Is there, let's just say we pull the trigger, put the cart in front of the horse, and say we pull the trigger on option 3. Is there some sort of quality reporting and extended warranty or guarantee or promise of the condition of the midshaft so that our warranty expires in 2 years and 4 years from now? They're saying, hey, you need a new midshaft.
We just don't take it in.
I mean, a 2-year warranty is great, and it's better than what we find on options 1 or 2, and it's better than 0 months, right? But in the middle of that thing is a midshaft, and it's the driver of the conversations and the heartache we're having right now. And is there any guarantee that the midshaft that comes with option 3 is in any better or worse shape?
We didn't know we had a problem with our midshaft until we had an oil leak.
Which is kind of the crux of the question, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would hope you could get 1,000 hours. It's about 500 a year, 2 years, get 1,000 hours out of that.
I mean, there would be some kind of report that comes with it that tells when they overhauled this or when it's coming through their quality assurance that they've held the tolerances, they've inspected, they've done this, they've done that.
Right, so that's basically when we had that conversation with them on the overhaul, which was their selling point was, we've done all the work on this unit because it's been on our lease program. And I can tell you, we have 17,000 hours on it since it's been overhauled, and everything that's in here is OEM parts. But they couldn't, so I said, well, to your point, Anthony, I asked them, can you guarantee that if we buy this thing, that this thing will be good to go for the next 5 years? I asked, would you provide us a warranty for 5 years? And they said, no, we can provide you for 12 months. And I said, well, what 12 months, how much more value does it add to us? They said, well, the value is that we've been maintaining it. I said, well, that may add value in your eyes, but doesn't add. So they said, well, let's go back and I'll see if I can get you a 2 or 3 year warranty. And he rented up the flagpole with their CFO and their exec, and they would do a 2 year.
Which means they might do 3.
So they do better work on their own stuff than they do on everybody else's
Right.
stuff.
But they won't guarantee that after the 2 year warranty, if something happens, they're not gonna stand behind anything after the 2 year warranty, so.
I guess that doesn't surprise me, really.
Right.
If we do go that route, from a sourcing and purchasing side, for that dollar amount, can we just buy that one, or do we have to go out and try to find bids?
Yeah, I'd have to check that out.
Well, I think a couple things. I think that's a really good question, Mark, if you could look into that from a legal perspective. And Jeremy, if you could calculate a kind of a break even if we were to pull the trigger on option 3, how many years does this thing have to be in service for us to get our money back? To calculate our break even, whatever that all means. I know there's a million moving parts there, but even if it's a range of 3 to 3.5, or 4 to 5.5, or something like that. I think because there's expenses that we're going to have to incur. If we pull the pin on everything and do none of these, there's expenses that we incur to fulfill our obligations, right? And that's the alternative. But Jeremy's break-even calculation, and what I'm asking him, I think, for break-even calculation on option 3 will help us be better informed about when does unit option 3 pay for itself. Not unit 3, option 3.
And we more than likely have a special meeting in our future, would be my guess.
I think we should.
Yeah.
And then the insurance thing, I think, is something worth following up on.
Yeah, I would
too.
say if you have some availability, probably early next week. I can
Whatever's right
talk
for you
about
guys.
insurance tomorrow and start the call.
So the legal question from a procurement standpoint and bid standpoint, insurance question, and then some kind of rough break even if it's not to the month, if it's to a half year or a quarter or a year or something, even a range allows us to build a little confidence in making a financial decision, at least myself.
And even to consider if we do nothing, what that means,
Yeah, I think that'd be some underlying work in Jeremy's break even probably.
you know, which is nothing to take lightly either, so.
I had this conversation with Jeremy a couple days ago too. In general, we've been getting a profit and loss statement from electrical production for the past better part of 10 years. And there's been business case made that we should stay in that line of business. So generally speaking, unless I see something that says fundamentals are changing, I generally feel we should continue to stay in the production business. Because for years, we've seen a P&L that says we should.
Right.
Mhm.
I agree. Sometimes you just need to reconfirm that.
Yeah, and I think that's this exercise, right?
Okay. Well, if you can try to schedule something when you guys are ready.
I can send out a email tomorrow to everyone, and I'll send a text to Kathy.
Give yourself enough time to.
Yeah, the only thing would be probably, the
Least-
calculations internally, I've got most of those already done.
Yeah.
Just running through my head, but it'd be more getting some real clarity on the insurance side of things. I think Mark and I had talked about the sole source, or there is another vendor that we're gonna be able to get that same type of unit from.
Yeah, that would be logical.
If we're gonna keep because I know, well, in fact, I know we had a conversation about it, because if we went out and tried to buy something else, it would trigger a whole new permit, which would be 6 to 8 to 9 months out. So that didn't really become a viable option.
Sure.
It had to be something that fit our permit if we wanted to stay in generation and forego some additional length of time where we had to buy capacity, but we'll double check on that piece.
Just don't want to get tripped up on any piece of the process.
Correct. Yeah, if it's not a like unit, we'll have to we'll have to go out and reapply for a permit
Okay.
on a unit, so.
Anything else the commission? I mean, this is kind of going to come to the surface in a real hurry, I think. If there is a legit second interested party in the replacement engine in option 3, I think we have to be mindful of that if we think that's going to be a viable option, so we don't end up shortchanging ourselves.
Good conversation. Thank you, guys. All right, that concludes the agenda for today's meeting. Bob, would you like the honors?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
I was gonna say, we can milk this out a little longer, so Bob's still on the commission for a little longer.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John.
You know, it all
Appreciate it.
$800 oil.